We begin the current Daf Mesechtes Bava Metzia Daf Yud. We begin 10 lines down with the top of the Yamid, where the Gemara continues with a related discussion from the previous Daf, another teaching from Rav Nachman, which directly relates back to what we were discussing regarding if someone picks up something for someone else, what is the halacha going to be? So we were discussing this concept of if you say a migui, do you say that, oh, okay, look, since he picks it up for himself, that he merits it for someone else. So then the Gemara gets into a discussion regarding if someone picks up a found object for his friend, what is the halacha? And for the rest of the world. Someone did discuss in today's daf, do you say that when someone picks up a lost found object for his friend, that his friend acquires it? Now, one of the variables of that question is when you grab something for a creditor, but it's going to be a liability for someone else, we say, okay, wait, you can't do this guy a favor when it's going to cause other people a loss. What's the halach of a poil? Regarding if a worker finds something, do you say that it goes to the employer? And a worker actually might be different because although whatever he's doing is for the employer, but employee has the ability, even middle of the day, to just quit his job. So therefore, not necessarily would you say whatever he finds would go to the master. Then the Gemara discusses after the next Mishnah, Arba Amish Aladam, the halacha that a person's Dalet Amis, his 4 cubic Amis belong to him, and he's kind of just by it being in his perimeter. Kin lekatan, the halachic status of a minor doing a kinyan. And Chatzim Hashem Yad is Rabbi, that the courtyard is included as a yad, an extension. A person's hand acquires from something, and we say a courtyard is an extension of that. And then the Gemara discusses regarding Chatzim Hashem Shlichus is Rabbi, that sometimes it won't work for yad, but it'll work for the halacha of agency. And then that gets into conversation regarding Shlichus V'Aveira. If a field is going to acquire, let's say, something stolen for you, well, then it's doing an agency for a sin, and we know that in Shlichus V'Aveira, how would that work? The halacha of Divrei Yav, Divrei Talmud, Divrei Mishaim, that gets into a conversation that generally, why do we say in Shlichus V'Aveira? Because we say, look, who are you listening to? To the guy who told you? He's the student. Hashem is the master. Who do you listen to? We cannot associate it. But that's only the shlich bar chayuvihu. That's only if the agent is someone that's obligated, but a field's not obligated. And then maybe you would say shlich bar because the field doesn't have free will, which is, as the Gemara calls it, ibay avid, ibay la'avid. It has to be someone that if he wants to, he could do it. If he doesn't want, he doesn't do it. Then you'll say ein shlich l'dvar aver. So begin the current Daf Yud. We begin 10 lines down at the top of the Yamid. Says the Gemara, Rav Nachman and Rav Chiz Damet, they both say the following halacha. So some guy's walking and he sees a Skagen watch. He's like, wow, his friend lost his friend like always wanted. He always saw this classmate that has a Skagen watch. He says, I'm going to pick it up for him. I know he really would love this Skagen watch. He picks it up. This Mציעא for his friend. Says Rav Nachman and Rav Chizda, Lo yikon l'chaveri. His friend does not acquire that watch that he picked up for him. Says, my time, what's the problem? Why not? Have a tayvis l'bal chayv. Yes, you're doing a schus, but it's like grabbing something for a creditor, where it's going to be a liability for others. Like when someone's coming and he's snatching someone else's, some guy's money because of a debt that he owes to someone else. So this guy comes first, and before a different creditor comes, and he grabs it for one of the creditors. Comes out, whoever's grabbing it. Yes, it's obviously a merit for the guy who's grabbing it for, but it's a liability when he grabs it that the other creditors are not going to be able to get it. That's the equivalent of a Mציעא, because everyone regarding a Mציעא is quote unquote a Bal Chayv, because everyone wants to get this Skagen watch. But Tayv is a Bal Chayv. Now, if you're snatching for a creditor, where it's a liability for others, the halacha is Lo Kana. Why is that? The reason is the Gemara in Ksuba says because you have no right to jump by yourself and create a liability to these people because the creditor didn't make you a shliach to go ahead and grab it. That's how Rashi says it. But Taisa says that's not correct, because Taisa brings down the Gemara in Ksubis that sounds like even if you were even an agent, you have no right to grab. If you're the creditor yourself, fine. But if you are not the guy himself, that's not a zachin la'adam shlei b'vam, that's a chav la'achrini, and therefore you have no right, and therefore the Mציעא is no different, because by you grabbing it, the Skagen watch for this friend of yours, 17 other people that would want to get that watch, they are now not getting it. Now, Isra Rav Nachman. However, Rav asked Rav Nachman from the following brisa. The brisa says, "Metzias poil la'atzmai." When a worker, an employee finds something, he keeps it for himself. Said the brisa. When do we say this? If the employer said to him, he hired him for a specific job. I want you to weed whacking today. I want you to do some hoeing today. Where he didn't hire him, but for a specific labor. So when he picks up, when he's in the middle of weed whacking, the guy asked him to do his whole yard. He's out there, whatever, in the front lawn. And when he picks up the found object, that's not from the work he's doing for the homeowner. So the worker requires it. Now, obviously, Rashi tells us he's going to have to take off from the wages that he hired him to do the weed whacking, and for all the moments he spent picking up, he wasn't doing the work. Fine. So he paid him $60 an hour, so he'll take off those few minutes, whatever it is, take off a few dollars that he was busy picking up this thing. Fine. Now, that's if he tells him something specific. But let's say he tells him, he says, I want you to work for me today. Whatever he's doing, he's working for the homeowner. So therefore, in that case, the balabais is going to acquire it. Then the found object belongs to the employer, because it's everything you're doing is you're working for me. So picking this up is also picking up for the employer. But one thing we see is when this worker is picking it up for the master, so that contradicts the halacha of Rav Nachman. Amalei says, no, Shani Payel, a worker is different. Why is a worker different? He says, I'll tell you why. Because the Yod Kiyad Balabayisu, his hand is like the hand of the employer, like the homeowner. So it's not like another person that's Chav Lachrinu. It's like the Bachayv himself. Bachayv himself could grab it. Here also, he's like that. Says Dima, really? Rav said, he says, the worker, he could back out of his job even in the middle of the day. So you can't tell me he's like an Eved or Isha or whatever, they're the Katana, that Mamish they're an extension of the master. If he could quit his job in the middle of the day, then you can't say that it's like Yad Balabais. It's not true. Amalei said to him, Kol as long as he doesn't quit his job, Yad Balabaisu, he's like the hand of the homeowner. And that's what we say, that when do we say Ki Hadar Bey, that he has the option of quitting his job in the middle of the workday? That's not because up until now his hand was not like the hand of the Balabais. That's time achrinu. That's for a different reason, that he's not we're not going to treat him like an Eved, where if he comes to leave his job from now on, he could back out. The chesiv, because the pasuk Yikra, Kili b'nei Yisrael avadim, because to me the Jewish people are slaves. What does that mean? Hashem is saying, Avadayhem v'le'avadim la'avadim. They're my slaves. They're not slaves to slaves. So therefore, the pasuk is teaching that he has the ability to quit his job, which Tais actually asks in Divrei Maskul Kili. He says, well, maybe you shouldn't be able to actually, work for someone, because you're learning out like a guy who works is like he's able to quit his job because you're not supposed to be a slave. So it says no, that's dafka by an Eved Ivri. They can't back out. They can't leave before the time. He needs a shtar shichur, then he violates avadehim. But we are comparing on some level to say that he's allowed to quit his job, even though he's just a regular laborer, because it's still in some level like avadehim, but avadim lavadim. But again, up until then, you are like yad balabais, and again, that would be an exception to the law. If the guy finds a lost object, yeah, the owner's going to get it. But another guy, a random guy, no, if he picks up something, it's not going to go and be kaina lacher. Now, however, he disagrees. He says, if someone picks up an object for his friend, the friend acquires it. But if you're going to say, what do you do with our Mishnah? Wait a second. What's our Mishnah? So we had on the previous daf that what happened is that someone was riding on the animal. He sees a found object. He said to his friend, give it to me. So the guy takes it, and he says, Ani zechiteba. I'm zeichen it. So what did the Mishnah say? Zachaba. So yeah, he actually is. He's actually zeichen it. Now, it sounds like that I'm zeichen it right now, which was the way Rav Nachman had said it. That what's going to happen? Zachaba. Even though he originally picked it up for his friend, says Rabbi Yechanan, that reason is because what did the Mishnah say? It said the Omar Tanali. He said, give it to me. V'lo Omar Zachali. He didn't say merit it for me with your picking up of it. So it comes out that he didn't make him a shliach to be makna with his picking up until when he would actually give it, the nesina, the tanali. Now, before he gave it, he already retracted from his agency. So that's not a case of makbiyah of to be kind of lechaveroi, because he said tanali. He didn't say zacheli. So that's why, says Rabbi Yochanan, that's not a contradiction to my halacha, that the truth is that makbiyah mitzil lechaveroi is kana chaveroi. So why in the Mishnah, especially if you learn like Rav Nachman, that the guy before, he picked it up for him, but then before he gives it to him, he says, I'm taking it for myself and he can keep it, but I thought the guy already acquired it. So Rabbi Yochanan, no, he didn't acquire it yet. If he would have said Zachali and he picked up, you're right, he wouldn't be able to back out anymore because he said Tanali, which Tais actually points out in the Masechah Rabbi Yochanan. He says, this seems to contradict Rabbi Yochanan himself in Ksubis and Gittin, that he says, Tevis l'bachayv is loikani. And Hamagrim is a case of Tevis l'bachayv. So how could you be kind of Mzil Tzilach Averi? Says Tais says, no, that's davka where you don't have a migid zachal nafshe. If you're grabbing for someone else as a creditor, you're not a creditor also. Who are you to grab for that guy when it's chav? But by Mציעא, you also could have taken it for yourself. So it says Tais, so that's where Rabbi Yochanan could say that's different, and therefore you could be Mzil Tzilach Averi and to be kana chaver. Then I'll look at the next Mishnah, continuing on this theme of finding a Mציעא. So Ras a Mציעא. Someone sees a Mציעא, a found object, and he falls on it. Meaning he throws his body on it. When someone else comes and the fumble happens, he grabs away the football. The guy that takes possession of it, literally, is he's zaych on it, and the guy who jumped on it doesn't get to keep it. So the Gemara is going to introduce a teaching that relates back to this. So Omar Resh Lakish Meshab Abba Kohen Bardla. He says that Arba Amish Aladam, the 4 amas of in the perimeter of a person, Koinis Lebechal Makom. It acquires it for him that wherever he is. And in other words, if around him there's a hefker item, so someone else is not allowed to go ahead and snatch it and grab it away. Says Imam Maitam, what's the reason for this? So Tikin Rabban instituted you don't want people to fight. So therefore, if this was already in his Dalet Amas, he gets to keep it. So Abaya says Moisiv Reb Chiya bar Yosef. Chiya bar Yosef asked on this a refutation from a Mishnah in Masechtas Peah. That was how Abaya said. Rava, he says Moisiv Reb Yaakov bar Idi is Reb Yaakov Idi, who he asked on this from a Mishnah in Seder Nezikin. What's these 2 questions? So the Gemara explains. Abaya says like this. Moisiv Reb Chiya bar Yosef, he asked from a Mishnah in Masechtas Peah. What's the question? Question is, the Mishnah says, Notal, if one of the paupers took miktsas peah, some of the peah that he already had gathered, he went to the corner of the field, he picked off a few grapes, he picked off a few of these fruits, and v'zark al ashar. Now he throws it on the rest, like, to acquire it. Like, okay, this is mine already. I threw on some of my bags already on this pears. Say no klum. Says the Mishnah, he has nothing over there. He has no rights because he threw on some of his payers that doesn't give him those fruits. Now, what happens if nafal lo yaleha? What happens if he falls on it? Or paras talisa leha? He takes his jacket and he throws it. People want to say that cheer, and if he throws his jacket on the payers, okay, it's mine. Mavir nice man, we remove him from it. Which actually the Bava Metzia asks a critical question that why isn't he called a Rasha? The Gemara tells us famous sugya onim ha'apach b'charara in Kedushin Afnan. A lot of these Yarchikalas, they learn the sugya onim ha'apach b'charara. If a poor person is trying to get a cookie and someone else goes and grabs it, he's called a Rasha. So at least here he puts his jacket on. At least Chach call him a Rasha. That how you allowed to remove the guy from it? So says Taisus, and the Vilna Gaon here and the guys that go on the side points out Rashi Kedushin disagrees with what Taisus is about to say, but that's because it's possible for you to buy a different piece of property. So why are you snatching what he wants to go and get? You're a Rasha. But by Mציעא, by Hefker, where you can't say that because there's no other Hefker. Hefker is Hefker. There's not more Hefker. So even the Rasha is not called, and therefore you're allowed to remove the guy from it. Okay. Says the Mishnah, also when you have a pile of shikha, a bundle, a forgotten bundle, same thing. If the guy throws stuff on it to like say, hey, this is my bundle, you have no rights to it. Says the Gemara, says Reb Chibar Yosef, if you say, like Rish Lakish, that a person's Dalet Amos acquires from wherever he is, so Nikni Lei, so let it be acquired to him by this guy who falls on it, Arba Amos Didei. It's not less than his 4 Amos, that it's in his perimeter that Rabban instituted, so why are you saying you remove him from it? He didn't say, I want to acquire it. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. If you're talking about Rabban instituted, who cares that he didn't say it? It's automatic, it's a kinyan. Says, no, I'll tell you why. Kivin the Nuffel, since he falls on it, Gully Daiti is revealing his intention that how does he want to acquire? You're showing that you want it to be with that you're jumping on it. You're not okay with that Dalet Amos being kind of for you. That's not what you had in mind to acquire with the halachic medium of what the Chum instituted. He thought that he's going to acquire it with his jumping on, and that's not a kinyan. Actually, that's why he loses it out. So therefore, it's not a shaila, it's not a difficulty on this teaching of Rish Lakish. Now we continue on with Beis, another approach to answer this question. Rav Papa, he says, Kita kin li Rabban Arba Amos. No, when did the Rabban institute this halacha that your Dalet Amos acquires for you to be kind of hefker item is bi'alma. And that's why Taisa Namanav discussed. He says it's not by Geneva. Like we didn't institute that everything in your Dalet Amos only like you have a magnetic field. Like you're walking, you have those circles around. Like you see the character in the video games. Like he's got this like halo around him. It's not everything, but when it comes to hefker, the Chum didn't want people to fight. So that's the Gemara is qualifying further and says, yeah, when Rabban Institute is ba'alma in general, let's say for example on a side street, which everyone has permission to walk on, or in the Rosh Hashanah, or in the sides of Rosh Hashanah, which is hefka for everyone, that you could like pull things that you need to go to get out from a pressing situation. So that's where they instituted that. Okay, it's going to be yours. But besad the balabayas, in the field of a personal private property, like the Rabban did not say you have Dalet Amos in that guy's field, and the Gemara explains meaning. Remember, we're talking about the halacha of peya. What's peya? Peya is you walk into someone's property, he leaves over a corner of the field, then you get to take, the payers that were there or the bundles that were forgotten. Now, though the Torah gave you a right for the payers inside of it, when did the Torah give you a right? To walk in, to take peya, the corner of the field, but that it should be your courtyard, that it's going to be your Dalet Amos, that you acquire whatever's in your area. The Torah didn't give you that right, and therefore the Chacham didn't institute it with the Dalet Amos, and that's why you're not going to get it. But that doesn't contradict the halacha that in general you do have Dalet Amos. Now, the Gemara goes back. That was one question we said that was asked from Masechtas Peya. Amar Rava, he said a different version. He says, Ma'aser Rabbi Yaakov Ba'idi Nezikin, that he asked from a Mishnah in Seder Nezikin. What question is that? So that's from our Mishnah. What does our Mishnah say? Our Mishnah says, Bava Metzia Daf. If someone sees a found object and he jumps on it, and then someone else comes along and takes possession of it, he says, the guy who took possession merits to the guy who jumps in it doesn't get it. Now the question is, same idea, but again, just from a different Mishnah. But if you say, a person Dalet Amos acquires from wherever he is, okay, so why isn't his Dalet Amos not acquired? Who cares that he jumped on it and that's not a kinyan, but it was in his Dalet Amos? Says again, what are we talking about over here? Same type of answer. He didn't say I want to acquire it. Says okay, but if you're talking about Rabban instituted, who cares that he didn't say it? It's automatic. Says no. That when you're jumping on it, Gully Daiti, you're revealing your intention that you want to acquire by your jumping, but you didn't want it with the Dalet Amos, and therefore it's not going to work for you. And therefore, that's why whoever gets it after you could get it. That's one approach. Rav Sheshes Amar, again, like what Rav Papa said in the first version, Rav Sheshes says, Kita kin Rabbana, when the Rabban institute this halacha is besimta, is by a side street, the Leidach Rabban, where the public is not so pressed. So we could say that you have a perimeter. In other words, you have your own space of Dalet Amos, but B'Shus Rabbim, which is the case of the Mishnah, in the public streets, The Kadachki Rabim, there's over congestion, overpopulation, there's people are walking in the streets, and it's tight area, like the Rabban. The Rabban did not institute because you don't have your own Dalet Amos. Don't come to a packed shul and complain that you have no space. You know what I'm saying? There's many people in the street, and you're not getting Dalet Amos to say, oh, is it my Dalet Amos? My Dalet Amos is 17 other people here in your Dalet Amos, and therefore the Rabban did not institute over there. But it says, but how can you say that? But the wording was of Rish Lakish. We start off the Gemara where it says you say wherever it is. Now you're starting to like cut me down to size and saying it's not here, it's not there, it's not Rosh Hashanah. It says no. When I said all places, I was coming to include the sides of Rosh Hashanah, not just the Simta, which is a side street, but even the sides of the street, meaning of the public streets. But in middle of the Rosh Hashanah, no, you don't have Dalet Amos. Now another teaching, again from Va'amr Rish Lakish Mishum Abba Kohen Bardla. He says, a ketana, a minor, ein lo chatzer. She doesn't have a courtyard. What does that mean? That if her husband throws her a get into her courtyard does not acquire for her to be divorced that way. And so to ein lo arba amas, if she was standing in the street and the husband threw her a get in her dalet amas, although if that was an adult woman, she would be divorced, as the Mishnah teaches in Gittin Avayin Chesed Ben Alf, to get to a woman in her house or etc. in her dalet amas. If she was standing in the street and he throws it to her, if it's close to her, she's going to be divorced. This minor does not have the halacha of chatzir and does not have the halacha of dalet amas. However, that's one opinion. Rabbi Yochanan disagrees, says no, yesh la chatzir. She has the halacha of a courtyard and yesh la amas, and she also has the halacha of her dalet amas. So the Gemara said, what's the machlekes over here? So the Gemara said, I'll explain to you. Marsa Rabbi Yochanan held chatzir. When you say that the courtyard is function for an extension for the woman, from what halachic medium are we using? Which principle tells us that a courtyard could work? It's because it's considered like in the principle of her hand, as Rashi brings. The pasuk says, "V'nasam biyada." You're going to put it into her hand to get. Now, yada doesn't mean only literally your hands. It means your domain, your possession, as the pasuk in Bamidbar says. V'yikach es kol artzim miyada. He took his whole land from his hand. Now, obviously, he's not taking his whole land from his hand. So, what miyada then obviously you see means from his possession. So, when you say v'nasam miyada that you put the get into her hand, it means not just her little hand. It means her possession too. Now, a chatzir is your possession. That's how it usually works. Oh, so kihech this layad. Just like the girl, the minor, says Rabbi Yochanan, has a hand, meaning when the moment she knows how to protect her get, the halacha is that she's divorced, as the Mishnah says in Mesechus Gittin, because the Torah only excludes a shaita. A shaita is someone that if you send her and she comes back, well, that's a shaita. I thought you got the message already that we're done. But a katana has a yad. So if she has a hand, she has a courtyard too. But Mar Savar Rish Lakish no, shlichus is Rabbi. The courtyard functions as a medium of an agent, meaning from the fact that the Torah included shlichus for a person, as the Brisa teaches in Kedushin of Memal of Medalev, when it says if v'shilach, where it says v'shilcha, but v'shilach teaches that a man can make a shliach, and v'shilcha teaches that a woman can make a shliach. So if we know that a shliach works, and that the Torah tells us v'shilcha that mibesa that you see that agency works. So that includes a courtyard that's also like her shliach. So wait a second, the shliach is less law. So just like a minor does not have the medium of agency, because the Mishnah teaches Mesechus Gittin that a child, a minor, cannot make a shliach, because when it says the halach of shlichus, both by Gittin and by Pesach, the context of the pasuk says the word ish. That's a man, an adult, not a minor. Oh, then chatzanami less law. So says Rish Lakish, then she doesn't have a courtyard, because she can't make a shliach. So that's machlekes. Says the Gemara, do we say chatzim mishum yada is rabbi, and she has a yad? Or do we say chatzim mishum shlichus rabbi, and she is not able to make shlichus? Says the Gemara, really? Is there anyone who says chatzim mishum shlichus is rabbi, that the courtyard gets included and the way it functions because from the medium of agency? But Vatanya, learn in a brisa. The pasuk says, if you're going to find by a guy, biyadai, in his possession, the geneva, oh, then you have the whole halacha of kefil and etc. when you catch a ganav. Now, says the Brisa, I would only know if you literally find it in his hand. Gagla, if it's on his roof, chatzera, his courtyard, kafifa, his enclosed areas, minayin, how do you know that if the animal walked in over there and he locked the door to steal it, that he's going to be chayiv? Tamalim, it says in the pasuk, himatzi, found, it will be found, mikamakum. That means in any situation, which Tosha discusses, well, shouldn't that be a klal prat? They says, no, that's what the Gemara told us right in Bava Kama, that when you have two klalim and you put the prat between them, al kapanim, we're including whatever is ke'ein haprat, whatever is similar to biyadai, which is your possession. Therefore, that includes also anything that's similar to that, which is gaga, chatzir, v'kafifa. Okay, but says the Gemara like this. You're going to think to say that chatzir mishum shlichus is rabbi. That now when we're including, the pasuk is saying not only biyadai, not only when you catch him with the stolen object in his hand, but even if you catch it in his yard, when he locked the door, that he's going to also be chayiv. What halachic principle is being used to say that chatzerai is going to be considered biyadai? If you say it's because of shlichus, that doesn't make sense. If that's the case, metzinu shlichut va'avera comes out that you're having an agent to do a sin. To say that your shlich is like yourself, that you're going to make the sender liable for the action of the shliach. What is the shliach doing? Stealing an animal. The field is mitam shlichus, you're saying. But wait a second. V'kaimalon, we know the halacha is, Gemara says in Kedushin, in the second period of Beis Mabeis, in shlichus v'avera. Agency doesn't work when it comes to a sin to make it that the mishalech should be liable for what the shliach is doing. So how are you making the owner of the field liable for the stolen item if it's misham shlichus? Obviously, no one says misham shlichus. How could you say that that's the machlekes? So Ravina says, no, it's not true. It's not a difficulty. Where do we say that in the shlich v'avera that there's no agency when it comes to an item of sin? That's where the agent is himself prohibited in that itself. That's what we say, the sender is going to be exempt, because we tell to the shliach, look, there's divrei Rav, there's the words of the master, Hashem. There's the words of the student, meaning the one who's sending you. Who do you listen to? You shouldn't have done it. And therefore, we cannot associate what you're doing to the one who sent you. It's your own fault. By a court, there's no free will. The Torah didn't warn a field not to steal. Then we actually do hold the one who sent him liable, and there's no flaw of ein shlichut v'avera. We say no, the agency is a liability of the owner. But then the Gemara says, I have to have the following question: is that really so? If the one is not a bar chiyuva, then you actually have no problem of ein shlichut v'avera. I have the following interesting question, says the Gemara. If someone tells a slave or a woman, "Tzu gambili, go out and steal from me," they actually don't have to pay. A Mishnah teaches in Bava Kama that when a woman or a child injures or damages or steals from others, they're exempt because they don't have any money, because all the money is owned by their father/husband. So, are you going to tell me that now this man who sent this woman or child is going to be liable because they're la b'nei chiyuv? So the Gemara says, nah. You're saying isha ve'eved b'nei chiyuv. That's not true. A woman and a slave, they are obligated. It's just that now they don't have money to pay. Which Tracy says, well, what about a cotton? Let's say, for example, he says, no, there's no shlichus there at all. Here we're talking about because you have a shliach, it's just because in shlichut v'avera. It's not true. Here, that you're not going to be chayiv because they are b'nei chiyuv. They just can't pay right now. There's not like learn the Mishnah in Bava Kama that says nisgarsha, when the woman gets divorced, then ha'isha nisgarsha isha, if the woman gets divorced, or nishtachar ebed, or the slave gets freed, chayav l'sham, they're going to have to pay. It's just that right now they can't pay, so that doesn't make it the la b'nei chiyuv. So that's not a good case. Now, the Gemara gives another approach to answer the question. Rav Sama Amei says, you were asking, you wanted to know that, wait a second, if you say chatzim shem shlichus rabai, including a chatzor to be chai for the geneva, well, isn't that a problem of if chatzim shem shlichus that your chatzor is a shlich v'avera? So at one answer, the Gemara says, no, but the lav b'nei chiyuv. Now the Gemara brings another approach and says, where do we say the flaw of that you can't have an agent for a sin? That's if that shliach, if it wants to, it could choose to do the agency. And if it wants to, it doesn't have to do it. Where it has no ability to acquiesce or to refuse. It just is a field, and forcibly the owner could lock the door and keep the stolen item in the field. So then, when it has no free will, so again, the first one is are they obligated or not? The second side is saying more fundamental, that is, they don't have a choice. When there's no choice in the agency, so then you say that the Meshaleach is going to be chayiv. So it sounds very similar to these two answers. They're either mechuyev in this halacha, or if they could choose to do it or not. What's the difference? The Gemara says, I'll tell you an interesting difference. Kohen d'amalei Yisrael. If a kohen tells a Yisrael, "Tzei v'kadosh li isha grusha," I want you to take this ring and give it to that grusha who lives down the block. I want you to get me engaged to that woman that's divorced. Now, the moment of kedushin is already a violation of loy yikachu, that the Kama not allowed to take a divorcee. Now, Taisus wonders, he says, in Div Masel D'Amal Yisrael, he says, why do you have to tell a Yisrael, a non-Kohen? Even if you tell a Kohen, that Kohen is the same as Yisrael, they're both not marrying that Gerusha. What's the difference Dafka Yisrael? So Taisus is interesting. He says, Kohen actually would be considered Bar Chiyuva, since if he would be Mekadosh for himself, he would be Chayiv. So he is actually considered Bar Chiyuva, even though really technically, in this right now, he's not Bar Chiyuva. But he says by the Yisrael, even though he'd be violating lifnei evel lesit michshel when he's mekadosh bar kohen. So one say he's also bar chiyuva. No, since he would be mekadosh for himself, he's not chayiv. That's not considered bar chiyuva because the lifnei evel is like a secondary thing. It's not the primary thing. Al kapanim says the Gemara. The difference between them is if he tells this Yisrael, go and get me engaged to this woman that's a grusha, or inami, a similar type of a case but very different, is ishta amala leisha. A man tells a woman akfeli cotton, says that, we're doing an upsharing. I don't want this whole payas thing. I want you to cut off all his hair. Now, a woman is not prohibited in the issa of loisakifu, of cutting off payas. Reason for that is, as the Gemara says, because she's not in the issa of baltashkas, of pasakanecha, meaning the issa not baltashka of wasting food, but of shaving with a razor by her beard. So she's not mechuyev in the halacha payas either. Now, whoever cuts off a child's payas is liable because the prohibition is the guy is getting his payas cut off just as much as the guy was cutting off the payas. Like it says, lesekifu in the plural, which is echad hanikav, echad makav b'masher. It's both the one who's doing it and the one who's getting it done, as the Gemara says in Nazir Daf Nun Zayin Beis. Now, Rashi points out the truth is, so why are we picking a child? It would be just as much as cutting off the payas of an adult. So Rashi says this because Mistama Gadol won't let his payas be cut off. Taisa says, slightly different, but akaponim, the point is that he tells this woman who's not mechuyev to cut off this kid's payas. So we're doing the upsharon, I want you to cut off the payas. Says the Gemara like this. According to the version that says the second version that says the Yisayid Hadavar is, when do you say that you cannot have a shliach doing a dvar aveira? Is if the shliach, if he wants to, he can do it. But if he wants to, he doesn't have to do it. Then you don't hold the one who sends liable because it's the shliach who's choosing. This Yisrael or this woman, if they choose to do it or they don't choose to do it, it's their choice. So we're not going to hold the man who told the woman or told that Yisrael to Mekadosh him to the Grusha. We don't hold him liable. But according to the first version that you said, wherever the agent is not themselves obligated, then you actually would hold the one who sends them liable. Then these two also. Then since the woman with the payas and the Yisrael with the grusha are not mechuyev, they're actually going to hold liable the kohen. You hold liable the husband who tells his wife, "Hey, cut off the payas." We're going to hold them liable. That's the difference between these two pshatim of if the shliach is mechuyev, or if the shliach has free will, of Ibai Ovid, Ibai Lavid. But then the Gemara says, going back to the original question, is there anyone, first we asked, is there anyone who could say chatzah that's from shlichus? We had a problem of shlich l'dvaver. No, not a problem, because of the two reasons that we said. Now the Gemara is asking the same question, but in different wording. Is there anyone who holds chatzah lab misham yoda israboy? It's asking just in the inverse. Is there anyone who doesn't hold that a chatzah is included from yad? Meaning, the reason why we're asking this way specifically is because even if you hold chatzah could be mitam shlichas, but if you hold mishum yad, well then just like the katana has a yad, then she should have a chatzah. So then why are you saying Rish Lakish that the woman, the girl cannot be divorced with her chatzah? So it says, really? Is there anyone who holds that a courtyard is not included because of a yad? But time in the Braisa, the pasuk says that when you're going to divorce a woman, it says you're going to put it in yada in her hand. It says the Braisa, only yada, I would only know her hand How do you know that you could divorce a woman putting on her roof, putting in her courtyard, putting in her enclosed areas, etc.? It says in the pasuk v'nasan, which teaches you mekal makom. What does that mean? So Rashi, the bottom Rashi explains. Really, the pasuk quote unquote should have said ubiyada yitnenu. In her hand, you place it because you want to know where you're putting it. Where you're putting it? Where? First, say in her hand, you put it. No, it says v'nasan biyada, the other order, to say that actually v'nasan is going on v'chasavla. It says v'chasavla sefer creases and v'nasan. So it's almost like a comma. V'nasan, period. And then biyada is its own thing. So, because if you wanted it only in the hand, it should say biyada yitneyu. By saying v'nasan is going on v'chasavla, so v'nasan means wherever you give it to her. Okay, but one thing the Gemara is trying to say is obviously you see that, as Rashi explains it, that the chatzera is included from the halacha of yad. Why? Because if you think that it's being included because of shlichus, it already says a pasuk by kedushin, as the Brisa teaches in kedushin Daf Mem Aleph, v'shilcha melama sheisha oiseh shliach. So why do you need a special limud for chatzera from v'nasan if you already know shlichus works by get? If it's chatz misham tam shlichus, obviously chatz misham yadis rabai. So then we're back to the question: if chatz misham yadis rabai, then everyone should agree that this ketana who has a yad should be able to have a chatzah required for her get. How could Rish Lakish disagree? Says the Gemara, no. In get, regarding get, no one disagrees. The chatzah misham yadis rabai. You're right. Rish Lakish would agree that a girl who's 10 years old could be divorced by putting it to her chatzah. Because you're right, we just proved that b'nasa b'yada mekal makom, that even chatzera, that's an extension of yad. And just like she has a yad, she would have a chatzah. Ki pligi the machlekes Rish Lakish and B'yechin was le'in Mציעא, regarding when she finds a lost object. Mars Rabbi Yechon held as a contain time of Yud Alv Manalv, who he says that a katana has a chatzar that you'll find the Mציעא get. Just like regarding get, we just proved that a katana has a chatzar. By Mציעא, she also has, and therefore she'll acquire a Mציעא that's in her yard. Mars Rabbi Shlokish held that no, lo yafin Mציעא get. We don't learn out a found object from a get. Why not? So Rashi explains, we don't learn out what's called mamayna from isura. They're different halachic categories. And by mammon, where do we know the chatzah works? We know it by the halachas of geneva, which is monetary theft, from imimatze timatze biyode hageneva. There you could say that it's not from yad. Remember, the only reason why we said by gittin it's from yad is because we already know shlichus from a different pasuk. So if you're including chatzera, well, then we know it's from yad. Yeah, by gittin it's from yad. But Mציעא, mammon could be different. That could be shlichus. Now, Rashi explains, he says, because in general we hold ein shliach ledvar aveira, that's why by geneva you had to write in the pasuk that chatzah is going to work, that shlich is going to be effective, because we really know in general shlichus works. So if we know that, so why do I need a pasuk that by geneva it's going to work? Oh, that's to address the question, says Rashi, of because of shlich ledvar aveira. Rabbi Kivega has a difficulty with that here on the side of the Gemara, but al kapanim, that's what the pasuk is teaching. It says Rashi, but you wouldn't know it that it's yad from the halacha of get. That's one approach. Or if you want to say a different approach. Big katana by a minor girl. You're right. No one disagrees. Delphine Mציעא get. Yeah, you learn that. Just like she has a chatzar, why would you say different? If her courtyard is an extension of her yad by laws of get, why would you say Mציעא is different? Here we're disagreeing regarding the halachas of a minor boy, which we don't find anywhere that the Torah includes that his chatzar is an extension of who he is. Okay, well then a boy from a girl. No, we don't find. The Torah talks about only by a girl. Maybe there, the Torah gave her that right, and because of that, then they extended it for monetary law also, but for a boy, no. Or you can say a third approach, that actually they're not disagreeing. As Rashi explains, two approaches in what you could say this means. Rish Lakish was talking about regarding a Mציעא, which that we said that we don't find anywhere that that's going to be effective because you cannot learn out from the laws of get. And Rabbi Yechon was talking about regarding get, which the Torah says explicitly it's mitam yad. Or another approach as Rashi, you could say Rish Lakish was talking about a katan, which we don't find that he has a chatzar, and Rabbi Yechon was talking about a katana, where we do find that she has a yad. Thank you to any time for hosting us.